Well, we are so excited to be joined by Tim Howard from Western Connecticut. Tim has a BA in music from Baldwin Wallace University and spent some time at the New England Conservatory. He's acted all over the place, including the Broadway national tours of Showboat and Parade. He's done some amazing directing work, which maybe we'll make him tell you a little bit about. And he's taught previously at Marymount and Stevens Point before becoming the musical theater coordinator at Western Connecticut, which is located in Danbury, Connecticut. They take classes of about 16, and they offer a BFA in theater arts with acting and MT. Maybe we can talk about those concentrations, a BA in theater arts, and some more stuff. Tim, welcome on the pod. How you doing today?
I am so well. How are
Oh,
you?
good. I'm so glad to hear that. I know I'm catching you at the end of your semester, so we're all ready to celebrate some holidays, hopefully in a
We
few
are.
weeks. Yeah.
We are indeed.
I'd love to hear, though I'm realizing I'm saying this, watch, it's going to get released post holidays and they're all going to be like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, that's the magic of podcasts, folks. I don't know what to say. I'd love to hear, I gave that brief little bio of you, just a couple bullet points there. I'd love to hear just about your journey to Western Connecticut. Is there anything else before we dive into the specifics of the school that you'd want us to know just about your journey there, or in terms of your career or your teaching, or whatever you'd want people to know in the previously on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting to know if you're going to come here because I am a professor there and I teach many of the music theater classes. I'm more of the acting end of it, although I've had a career
Uh-huh.
also as a music director. Um, so I think that what is probably important to know is that I'm in this position because of my extensive professional experience, which was
Yep.
accepted to give me the job, and I'm now
Yep.
full professor. But yeah, so I started at Baldwin Wallace, and I was accepted as both a classical voice major and also a piano major.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, and also acted in shows, and then I moved to Boston and was accepted for a full ride at Boston Conservatory. I'm sorry, New England Conservatory in
Mm-hmm.
Boston, and did about a year there, but had also started working with an acting coach, and that really was where my heart was. And
Mm-hmm.
within a couple months, I got my first equity job, and I worked kind of nonstop in Boston. So I thought, well, this is the next step is New York, only
Yep.
3.5 hours away. So I ended up there. And I was starting out when I first, started acting. I got my acting card about when I was about 24, I guess. And I had been groomed at Baldwin Wallace to be like the next Alfred Drake or Howard Keel leading man.
Uh-huh.
And so by the time I was like 27 and had my equity card, my hair was pretty much had completely fallen out. And casting directors were like, wow, he's great. We have no idea what to do with him
Mm.
because it was before Bald was beautiful. And so then somebody heard me play the piano at a theater, regional theater in Boston that I was acting at. And so then they asked me to music direct something, and that
Mhm.
was successful. And then that led me to having a career as a music director, which led me to having a career as a director up through the beginning of my 30s. And then I figured out, like Madonna, I could recreate myself into my own version, and then started working all the time. And so through my 30s and into my 40s, I was very fortunate to work in both plays and musicals
Mhm.
in lots of regional theaters, and then ended up booking Showboat, which I did for 3 years under Hal Prince's direction, and then Parade again under his direction, and with Jason Robert Brown actually conducting the
Mhm.
orchestra. So that was a major um, highlight for me.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and then it kind of just started to transfer into academia, but I still keep my professional career going, and I
Yep.
am really focused on new works, and I try to take that in. And I actually even have a class, which is a new works class to mirror the 29-hour reading to prepare
Mhm.
our BFA upper level music theater students to do that. Um,
I love it. I think you're one of the only professors that so far describe themselves as Madonna on their journey to school. So I really appreciate that. All right, so let's get into we're starting to already. So get into Western Connecticut, and especially with your previous experience teaching at other places, and just your professional experience seeing students from all over the country. What do you think sort of makes a Western Connecticut student unique? And again, it doesn't have to be completely unique, but what is the sort of oeuvre of what is a Western Connecticut student in terms of the kind of people that you see on campus?
Yeah. So for the music theater program, my motto for the program is be the best you. So we're not a cookie cutter school. I really think that there's a place for everyone in the business, whether you're a leading man, an ingenue, a character person. So we kind of um, groom our students that way to kind of get to know them and to really bring that quality that makes them unique out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think that would be highlights of our program would be number one, location. So we're just a little over an hour from the city.
Mm-hmm.
So if a student is interested in getting to the East Coast and getting close to seeing shows and being connected on Broadway, but not feeling totally ready to be in New York City, which I definitely wasn't at
Yep.
18 years old, then it's an excellent option. We have this school was kind of chosen as the premier art school in Connecticut. So it got all these grants, and we have this fantastic $98 million facility that we get to play in
Mm-hmm.
that is for both for the theater, music, and art. But we have
Mm-hmm.
two main spaces, our black box and then our main stage, which is both of them are state of the art. So that's fantastic. So the
Yep.
facility, the location, and the faculty. So with our faculty, it's kind of an embarrassment of riches. Almost all of us have had significant careers in the Broadway community, and I
Mm-hmm.
think because we're close to New York, we can get a lot of also, in addition to the full time adjuncts
Mm-hmm.
who have had major careers. So between all of us, we have Tony Awards, Drama Desk, Astaire Awards. So that the faculty is kind of crazy.
I
Uh,
like that calculation. I try to do that with my wife too. I say between us we have a Tony nomination. Between us we have a Grammy. Just doing the between us gets to like count. That's very helpful to sort of weave it in. Let's talk a little bit about curriculum specifically. So take me through, especially as a BFA MT. Though certainly we can hear this in the acting, and you can maybe talk a little bit about those two tracks or how they work at your school potentially differently. I'd love to just hear about like what would the 4 years look like, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, in terms of the kind of stuff I'd be studying.
sure. So of course you would have uh, voice for all 4 years with a private voice teacher, of course, and also in addition to that, then you also have 10 sessions per semester with a voice coach
Mm-hmm.
where you can really run anything you would like with that with your coach who's a pianist and will help you with that. And so we have the technician and then we also have the coach.
Mm-hmm.
That's for all 4 years. You start out, it's sequenced with the dance, and we have Elizabeth Parkinson and Scott Wise and Marianne Lamb all teaching for us. So you start with ballet the first semester, then go to jazz, and that's usually Marianne Lamb, and then modern, and then finally tap with Scott Wise. And then you have two more semesters of combination class where you
Mm-hmm.
you come in and learn a new combination each class, and that's meant to actually be audited so that you would have dance for all 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you would start immediately with acting one. So you're required acting one, acting two, acting three. You have the option of then, in addition, taking Shakespeare, acting for the camera. Um, we have, yeah, that's an amazing and very popular class.
Mm-hmm.
We are basically based in Stanislavski as far as our acting technique, but I also use Meisner, and we also offer a separate Meisner class
Mm-hmm.
to give the students more tools to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in addition, for the music theater program, then you have music theater workshop, advanced music theater workshop, and I teach both of those. That would be freshman, sophomore year. Then in the junior year, you have singing to song. And then in addition to that, then you would have the new works class, which again is
Mm-hmm.
near the 29-hour reading, equity reading. Um, and then you would have audition techniques, which is really just straight acting that I teach as well in the fall of your senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And then the culmination of that is in the final semester is senior showcase and
Yep.
also transition workshop. So the
Yep.
transition workshop, it's basically learning everything you need to know about the business. I
Yep.
cover all the unions, the different kinds of contracts, um, uh, how to do your taxes as a performing artist,
Hmm.
basically, and everyone's required to have a website when they leave as well, so that they're completely set up. In that final semester, with that, I bring in different agents and casting directors to work with them. I know a lot of schools have gone that direction for a senior showcase and have had a lot of luck with that. So in the last 2 years, I implemented that,
Hmm.
and that has been very helpful because we do that in addition to the senior showcase in New York City.
Yep.
So I think as our program has really grown, we've gotten an excellent reputation with the agents,
Yep.
and so when I contact them to see if they want to come, it's so much easier for me now because they've seen what we do and they're very interested. And
Yep.
so I would say that usually for our music theater, for the last 2 to 3 years, it's been three-fourths to seven-eighths of our students getting representation
That's
from that.
awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And another example of the advantage of the geography of being close enough, both with professors, but then also with industry representation. Not that you can't get those to the middle of the country, but it's a bigger ask to say fly out here and stay versus come up for the day.
Yeah,
Which I think is
exactly. They
powerful.
can just hop on the train at Grand Central and
Yep.
be there in an hour and 20 minutes. So
Um, that was so comprehensive for the MTs, and I'd love to hear a little bit from an acting perspective. If I'm interested in studying acting,
yeah,
what options are available to me? You know, a lot of our actors are going, I can sing, and I'm interested in doing musicals, but maybe my focus more on acting. What would that look like curriculum wise?
yeah, actually, so that's I'm glad you asked about that. Uh, we've had this the program has been around for quite a while. This is my 10th year. Um, and we are NAST accredited, which is of course the fancy schmancy stamp of approval by theater schools. And so we have certain regulations which keeps us at 16 per class.
Hmm.
And so that's true with the BFA um, music theater, but then our new BFA in acting, a BFA in stage management, and then also BFA in design tech.
Hmm.
And we realized that we really needed, because the quality of work that we were doing warranted all BFAs, but we
Yep.
didn't have that until 2 years ago.
Hmm.
So the BFA acting track is similar, where you would again, and our MTs and our straight acting are in the same class
Hmm.
many times. So that same track would happen for acting one, acting two, acting three, audition techniques, senior showcase as well,
Hmm.
and as well as transition workshop. But then they would also have stage combat that they'd be that is part of their curriculum.
Hmm.
In addition, they would also have a dialects class. They are also required to take the Meisner class.
Hmm.
So it's a similar track. It's
Yep.
just more specialized. One of the attributes that I did not mention when we were talking about the highlights of the program, which is a major thing, is we are very production oriented.
Hmm.
We do 6 main stage shows per year. That's 3 per semester, and every student is required to do Theater 300 for 7 semesters. That means that everybody, we don't buy into the star system. That means that you may be the lead in one show, and the next show you may be running the spotlight. But we
Uh-huh.
believe that theater is the most collaborative art form. And so we really want everybody to have a knowledge of what it takes to really put on a show.
Hmm.
Our production standards are extraordinarily high because everyone is required to work on each show. We either bring in a guest director or it's one of the full-time staff that would
Hmm.
direct. But we also hire professional designers as well. When a student is getting to be a place where we feel like they could be a design lighting designer, for example, for one of the main stage, we will definitely try to give that opportunity, and we have. And as that program builds, I would imagine that's going to happen more.
Yep.
But we are very very production oriented, and we treat it as a department. So that means that I I direct musicals, I direct straight plays. I just did Angels in America Part 1 and Part
Hmm.
2. And so there were music theater students in that, and straight and BFA acting. Uh,
Hmm.
when I did Sweeney Todd, we had some BFA actors in it as well. So we mix and match. You get a
Yep.
full range. It used to be that you were a music theater actor or you're just a straight actor.
Hmm.
And I don't think the business really buys into that very much anymore. And we certainly don't.
Yep, that's well said. You mentioned a little bit about this, but I'd love just to hear in terms of the sort of broader campus life outside of the sort of theater school. Both what is my campus experience? What is sort of the experience of being on this college, and then also academically, are there any options, or what are the options outside of the theater school that the MTs and actors might take?
So yeah, there's a number of things I probably would like to mention. It's a conservatory-esque training within a liberal arts college.
Hmm.
So it's 120 credits total, 80 in your major, 40 outside. Now there are
Yep.
some cognates like music theater history. I didn't mention.
Yep.
So you take that music theater history 1 and music theater history 2, and those actually count double dip, and so
Yep.
those count towards your 40 as well.
Yep.
As far
So
as
it
the
means closer to maybe 75% of your classes are going to be musical theater oriented than the 66%.
Definitely,
Yep.
definitely. I would
Hmm.
say yes, 75 to 80%,
Yep.
depending. If you come in with any AP credits, then it's going to be less, and you can take more electives.
Hmm.
Currently, we're on a competency-based program. They're looking at maybe changing that, but right now it's
To an
competency-based.
incompetency-based program, or what would
Oh
the
no,
change would be?
competency.
No, I
Uh,
said, what would you change it to? To something incompetent? That seems
incompetent. Well, that would be an interesting
an
option.
interesting
Yeah.
choice. Yeah, wouldn't change away from competence. But how many of your students end up choosing to do a minor or do something with outside of the theater world? Do you get psychology minors? Do you get people who say, I'm going to get a minor in English or even a double major?
We do have students that minor in something like business or psychology. It really depends on how many AP credits they come in with,
Yeah,
because it's a pretty rigid program to get through in 4 years with
yeah,
that many credits that you have to take. So if someone comes in and they have a lot of college credits already, then I definitely encourage them to get a minor. Uh,
uh-huh.
so some of them do that as well.
Yep. But you also mentioned 7 semesters of Theater 300. So I could be in my junior year still writing. I'm still running Lightboard and not so easy to do my psychology homework while I'm running Lightboard.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, we work hard there, and we keep everyone very, very busy.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
You mentioned, the showcase in New York. How many of your students end up going straight to New York City versus to other places? Do you notice, especially in the past couple of years, you mentioned the sort of reputation growing. Do most of your students end up going, "Hey, I take that trip an hour down"? Do more students go somewhere else, or what is that sort of
Well,
diaspora
it's
after school?
kind of morphed over the time that I've been, because it used to be pretty much a Connecticut school. Now it's
Hmm.
nationally known, and we have people from all over the country. So it is definitely, if you are from Connecticut and you got in as one of the 16 incoming
Yep.
for either one of the programs, um, then you could possibly take that train in and still
Yep.
have representation and still be hitting some of the auditions. I would say the percentage right now, I would say probably about half that move to New York, and
Yep.
others that just say, you know what, I'm going to try to make this work. It's a bit cheaper, and I'm very close, so I can make it to as many auditions as I want.
Yep.
But that's why we're in a rare, situation, because we are so close.
Yep.
But it depends on where someone's from. We have reciprocity. That means for the tuition. So if you're a Connecticut resident, you get, obviously a lower because it's a state school.
Yep.
But they have opened it up so that New York and New Jersey also get the same benefit. Um,
Of
and
in-state tuition you're talking about.
what's that?
Of in-state tuition you're talking about.
In-state
Yep.
tuition.
Yep.
Correct.
Which from our crack research team, it looked like it's about 13,000. Is that true? In state and about 17,000 out of state. That's before we talk about scholarships. What does that look like from a student perspective in terms of if I were a student? I mean, it's already lower than a lot of schools are to start. But if I were a student coming in, maybe I'm in New York and I'm getting that in state. Are there any ways to get that number lower than the 13,000?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot, and they've increased. there's a lot of academic scholarships. So if you
Hmm.
get honors, that has its own scholarship. Then there's 2 to 3 other higher levels. So there's if you get the top scholarship, which is the presidential scholarship, that's basically a full ride
And
with
that's an academic scholarship, the
that's an
presidential.
academic
Yep.
scholarship. Yeah. So many of our because we have a decent amount of scholarships through academic, that is largely our scholarships.
Yep.
But you are correct. I When you look at the price for our school compared
Yep.
to others, it's kind of incredible because the
For sure.
facility is outrageous. And I've been around and I've seen other facilities and where they get to play. And so it's kind of bizarre almost that you would be able to get this kind of training and be in this kind of facility for the cost
Yep.
that I don't really know how they do it, frankly.
I love it. My last question on this subject, just as you're doing those, having those conversations, and you're saying some of those conversations, certain with agents and managers, become easier as their reputation increases. I'm sure that's true with families too. That you have more students as they're signing on the dotted line of going, "Hey, I'm getting excited about this school." Why do you choose? I'd love to kind of hear like, why do you hear that students choose to say, yes, I'm going to Western Connecticut? And then if you hear back, are there reasons why you hear someone says, here's the reason I'm going with a different school? Why do they choose your school? And then maybe, are there any reasons why you find they don't choose your school when they're making their final decisions?
Yeah. Um, so I can speak to that a bit. I think that my goal when anybody makes it through the pre-screen and comes to hopefully see one of our shows and audition at the same time, I think once they see one of our shows, that's kind of a deciding factor for a lot of our
Hmm.
students because almost all of them say this is the top level of a production that I've seen for any of the schools. When people audition for us, I don't get the mentality of not treating someone with respect when they come
Hmm.
to audition for you. And some schools, I think, I hear that a lot is they went and auditioned and they just did not feel welcomed. And
Hmm.
so I always want everyone to walk away wanting to come, whether we have a spot for them or not.
Hmm.
So our students are our strongest advocate for that, and they all volunteer to work audition days. There's a good vibe,
Hmm.
and I I often talk about the attitude and that we are lucky to do theater, but we leave the drama for the stage.
Yep.
And so I think that is one of the reasons that people come because they know they're going to be in a very competitive yet supportive environment.
Yep.
Um, in terms of, I think it really depends on what you're looking for. I mean, in a school. One thing I didn't mention was the musicianship class that our chair, Justin Cowan, teaches. And that's a 2 semester, and he teaches the best musician class I've seen. And
Hmm.
students really come out extraordinarily strong musicians, and many of them don't have those skills before. Um, so
You're
that
successfully so far ducking the reasons they would not come to your school. It's okay if you want to duck it, but are there
well,
any reasons you hear
I'm trying
where they go, you know
as
what, I choose the
as
different
I'm
direction?
talking, I'm trying to think some of the reasons. If you are going because we are not a music theater light program, and because we are heavy acting based,
Hmm.
if you are really know that you're like a dancer first and
Uh-huh.
that you just really want to land a job in the chorus of a Broadway show, then maybe you're going to go to a different school that has the emphasis in dance first.
Uh-huh.
Or so that would be, and it feels weird to say that when I have these Tony Award winners
Yep.
teaching, so they're getting amazing training, and there's amazing dancers there. We have a
Yep.
wide range, but again, because I believe in the fact that there's a place for everyone in the business, and because we run the season almost like a regional theater, we
Hmm.
want a variety of young artist
Yep.
actors, and not just a cookie cutter
Yep.
um, school.
Yep. Well said. Okay. So we're going to take a quick break. And on the back end, we'll talk a little bit more about the audition and admission process. So we'll be right back. All right. We are back with Tim Howard from Western Connecticut. And I want to talk a little bit about the audition process. So, let's start with maybe those pre screen videos you mentioned. I just love to see, like, as you're culling through pre-screens as they come in, and you're making those decisions of going, yes, I want to see you for an on-campus audition. We'll get to that in a second, or a regional audition. I'd love to hear about what are you looking for in those pre-screen videos that might lead you ultimately to a yes or a no from that video.
Well, that's that's a great question. I'm obviously know from working in the business that you have to have a great voice, but I also know that the acting is ultimately what's going to book the job
Hmm.
when you leave WestCon. So I'm definitely looking for someone who has an acting clue and
Hmm.
or an it factor that might be trainable in that way. Obviously, we want them to have a great voice, um, and and then once they make it to the through the pre-screen, then of course we dance them in the actual
Yep.
audition. But in terms of again, I'm looking for diversity, big time. That has been my mission. I live in Jackson Heights, New York, which is the
Hmm.
most ethnically diverse area in the world, and I have always wanted my program to mirror that. And I
Hmm.
think as a department, we want to mirror that. So we're looking for diversity. We're looking uh, for as many different talented singer actors as we can possibly get to really support our program.
Yeah. And about what percentage of those students, if you don't mind sharing, like, in terms of you get a certain number of pre-screens and a certain number of people are going to get a live audition. Do you have a sense of what that initial cut number is?
For pre-screens,
Hmm.
yeah, I would say I would say a little more than half make it through the pre-screen.
Uh-huh. Totally makes sense. And then with that next phase, where are they auditioning? So let's just talk about what the opportunities are between potential on-campus auditions, unifieds. It looks like you guys traditionally have gone to Chicago and New York, at least,
But we have
and then
always
other
gone.
opportunities.
Yeah, sorry. We have
No.
always gone to the Unified in New York.
Hmm.
We have many times gone to Florida Combined Auditions, which is, I don't believe, happening this year. We've
Hmm.
gone to Cap United.
Hmm.
We did not go to Cap United this year because of some scheduling issues.
Hmm.
And this year is actually the first year that we're going to Chicago.
Oh, great. Oh, we love it.
Right. Yeah, so this is our first year to go, so I'm very excited about that.
Yep.
Uh, but those are basically, yeah, we cover all the biggies pretty much in terms of trying to see people from all across the country.
And then how would that work in terms of, are there virtual options too if students aren't able to make one of those unifieds?
Occasionally, yeah, we if there's somebody that has a an extraordinary situation where they can't get to campus, then we will honor that. I always let students know that it's it's just so important to go to where you're interested in studying,
Hmm.
because you have to make sure that it's the right vibe for you.
Hmm.
And if you don't actually come to campus and see like the amazing facility and see where you'll be on campus and see whether that feels right for you, then so we really highly encourage that. But
Yeah.
yes, we will do a virtual audition, but they're never quite as successful as an in-person.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, so let's talk about that audition in the room now. So I've passed my pre-screen, so there's enough of a talent or a potential it factor that you've seen at that point. When you're in the room then with them, what are you doing to kind of sniff for that it factor or to make that ultimate yes that decision that you're going for? Is it more about what they bring in the first time? Is it about the interview? Is it about the potential adjustments you might give them? What is really sort of giving you the most information about students?
Yes, yes, and yes. It's about it's about seeing, as we know, it's become a bit big business with preparing students, and so sometimes students come in and they're very well prepared, and they're just, I want to see. I'm absolutely the most interested in just getting to know them once
Hmm.
they're in the room. Because if you are, everyone is unique, and that's what I'm really looking for, then we can groom you and train you. But, what are you giving? And so some people come in very, very prepared, and it's what I call an actortron. and
Mhm.
it doesn't allow me to really see and let them come through their material.
Mhm.
So that's something that I work with them on if they do. And listen, I get it. I mean, I auditioned so much of my life that I know the stress, and so I try to make
Mhm.
people as comfortable as they possibly can be.
Mhm.
The interview is not like an interview of like finding out what they did. I've got their resume. It's
Mhm.
just finding out who they are, and and getting their sense of humor. If we're going to only taking 16 per incoming class, we're going to spend a lot of time together, and I want to
Mhm.
make sure that we vibe, and I feel like I can be that person that can make differences in their artistry. And
Mhm.
so I want to get to know them. I want to see what's going to make them unique, and just see the real person. um, so that's really kind of what I'm looking for. We will occasionally, ask for something that wasn't, that might be in their book, just to kind of shake it up a bit.
Mhm.
Or I may ask them to do their monologue again. And if I do that, that usually means I'm interested. So
Yep.
that's what students really need to know. It gives them a chance to see what my style is in directing them or
Yep.
coaching them, and also lets me see how they can make adjustments
Yep.
and whether they can really take that or what they bring into it. And then on the other hand, there are people that haven't had the luxury of being coached
Mhm.
as much. And so that's sometimes when you're really looking for that it factor. You can
Yep.
see that it's like, okay, there's making simple mistakes,
Yep.
but those mistakes are just because they just haven't been coached appropriately. They
Totally.
haven't been
Yep.
coached at all. So you kind of have to be very intuitive, which I think I am, and kind of choose people that way.
Yep. That's well said. And then as you're making those final yes decisions, you mentioned sort of the importance of diversity to you in terms of just the way you're putting together your classes. What is the ultimate magic of how you're balancing out the talent that you're seeing, the human beings that you're seeing, and then you're trying to put together a class of 16. What are all the things that you're thinking about and you're putting this together? And especially I'd love to hear, knowing you might not yield 100% of your class, how does that work with the first round of yeses, but then also the potential waitlist movement or other people, if someone says no to you, then how things fill those slots? How do you sort of break that down in year 16?
Yeah, well, that has gotten it's a real it's like gambling. You're kind of choosing how many people you're going to accept to actually hit that magic number of 16.
Hmm.
And as we've grown in reputation, and as a result of COVID and Zoom taking over, and more people can now, because of the pre-screens, audition for you. But they're also
Hmm.
auditioning for 20 schools.
Hmm.
So and they may get 10 other yeses.
Yep.
So you obviously put out more yeses than what you can fully accept. And total transparency, this is what every school is doing.
Yep.
Um, and then in addition, I have a wait list. I don't make that wait list huge. But anybody that's actually on the wait list means like I am okay and excited if we could actually offer them a spot.
Yep.
So they would get through if they made it through the pre-screen and I saw them at one of the locations, then it's either they would get an acceptance letter or a wait list letter, or we're sorry, but we don't have a spot for you.
Yep.
Um,
And how do you factor in your perception of their interest to that decision? Like, of course, we know all the factors in different ways they may weigh in terms of what would make you interested in them. But is it a factor for you when someone's on a wait list, or even before the wait list moment of going, "Hey, this person seemed really interested in us. We think we might get a yes back." How do you sort of weigh that, or do you weigh that at all in those acceptances?
oh yeah, I definitely do, and I'll also look at were they offered scholarship? Were they offered
Uh
one
huh.
presidential scholarship? Because it informs me, number one, okay, that's going to be a pretty sweet deal for the student.
Uh huh.
And number two, if they've got talent and they are that, intelligent and that hard worker to
Yep.
become, a scholarship winner, academic scholarship winner, that means that they're probably going to be more successful. Um,
Hmm.
what we do is offer for anybody that was accepted or waitlisted for them to come and do a shadow day.
Uh-huh.
And most actually take advantage of that once they've had an acceptance.
Yep.
And so we arrange for them to shadow for a full day. One of the students, so they get to see a variety of classes, voice lesson, dance classes, and
Yep.
kind of see what the vibe is and talk to the students and see if they can imagine themselves there.
Yep.
Uh, they also meet with me. I chat them up and kind of try to answer any questions that might still be there for them. And yeah, that's really the process. For the students that I really feel like it's a good fit instinctually, then of course I'm going to try to pursue them a bit more and
Yep.
see
Yep.
how else we can just get them there.
Yep. And you mentioned looking at did they receive the presidential scholarship in terms of the academic side of things? Is there any other interaction that you have with the academic side of it? Do you read their essays? Do you look at their grades and SATs directly? How does it work in terms of their barrier to entry from an academic perspective, and then how that factors in for you guys artistically?
Yeah, I have a great relationship with admissions, and so I will pick up the phone if I have a question about somebody. But they immediately, once I've given the list of the people that we're accepting and waitlisting, then they will get immediately to me the scholarships that have been awarded to those students, so
Yep.
that I see where they are and whether that's going to be a sweet deal for them.
Yep.
But I don't, as far as like an essay and things like that. I'll see what their GPA is and their scores, because that
Mm-hmm.
comes out on the chart when they provide that information with scholarships. But in terms of an essay, no, I kind of replace that with the in-person
The
interview.
edition itself totally makes sense. All right. Well, we have a little bit of time to do some bonus questions. So I'm going to do at least one bonus question on you, and then we'll see where it goes. But I'd love to just talk a little bit about, your journey from actor to director. I think that's something that a lot of people are interested in. I just had a question last night at a workshop going, I'm someone who wants to act and then ultimately direct. They're kind of already planning, hey, 20 years from now, want to transition into that. I just love to hear, how did that happen for you in terms of, you know, not having formal quote unquote directing training,
Yeah.
necessarily, which a lot of people don't. You're working on a Broadway tour. How do you then? I think you're eventually going to work with one of the directors that you worked with. I think did I say that correctly? So how does that work in terms of your transition and how that worked?
That's a that's a great question. So my first major thing that I directed was in Boston, and I directed a production of Hair,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the 20th anniversary at that point, and so there was I kind of wanted to make it our own, and so there was a song that was done. They did a concert down at the UN of Hair songs, and it was like a variety of stars like B. Arthur singing Black Boys and so forth. And there was a song that I wanted from that about the homeless that I thought would work really nicely in this in our production of Hair.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I was like 29 or 30 years old, and I just had crazy courage, and I contacted the writers and
Mm-hmm.
said, "Hey, I'd love to use this song in this production I'm directing," and sent it to their agent. And the next day, I got a call from Jerome Ragney, and uh, he said, "I understand you want to use this song," and he was like, "Well, you can't because it's for another show, but tell me about the show." And so so I did, and I told him my ideas, and he liked them, and so they got involved. They pulled some of the script from
Mm-hmm.
the original show down at the Public, and so they ultimately it became the 20th anniversary production, revised version of the script, and some of
Uh-huh.
those revisions are actually in the Tams Whitmark
Mm.
when you rent it out. So that was the first major thing. But then when my acting career kind of really retook off in my 30s,
These are your
I,
Madonna phase here.
my Madonna
Mm-hmm.
yes. um, I I again was very fortunate to work with Hal Prince, and so
Mm-hmm.
Hal actually um, became my mentor, and I
Mm-hmm.
learned so much about directing from him. And so I know that particularly during Parade, when we got into tech, when you're as an actor, you're supposed to be in the dressing room just waiting to be
Yes.
called on. and I would sneak out into the house to
Uh-huh.
see how he was working with the lighting designer and the set designer. And at first he kind of glared at me like, "What are you doing out there here?" And I just was like, kind of scared. And then he kind of caught on that I was
Uh-huh.
actually just, you know, observing him and
Yep.
how the way he worked. And he kind of started to perform for me then.
Mhm.
And so at that point, then, he was a really amazing resource for me to kind of help mentor me in 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 my directing career.
Yep.
And so I was very fortunate to have had that experience, and that really influenced my directing a lot.
And did you do any official assisting? Like, were you doing any assisting directing, or was it more just I'm observing while I'm
No,
acting in the show?
it was a lot of conversations, and
Mhm.
it was me just observing pretty much
Yep.
because I was already acting in the shows, so I couldn't
And
really.
then,
Yeah.
yeah, as you're trying to do more directing, because I think that's the there's a lot of mystery for actors, especially to be like, but then how do I like go get directing jobs? Like how did you then get your name out there? How did you, once you've done a couple productions, it's easy to be like, well, someone saw your production and done it. But how do you sort of start off going, hey, come, I'd be interested in directing the show. How do you sort of make those reach outs for yourself?
Well, I know that when young artists who are actors or have an interest in directing, you know, I highly encourage them to go and really have their acting career first,
Hmm.
and really learn their craft and really learn the collaborative process. I I think unless you're going to go to a school and a master's program to just get your directing degree, then I think then you really need to just learn your craft more so that you can
Hmm.
really be an actor's director. Um, uh, yeah, what was the original question?
Well, I was just saying, how did you
How
actually
did I get there?
solicit jobs? How did you, at 29 years old, you're directing this production in
Yeah, so
Boston.
it
How did
kind
that come into be?
of happened because of my, it just went from acting to then music directing, and then, hey, we think you could direct, and then I did, and then I just started submitting my stuff, and
Uh-huh.
I had a lot of success. I mean, we were involved for many years when it was really hot with the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival.
Mhm.
So in my first year at Western, uh, they asked me if I would direct parade when I was like, okay, that would be exciting. And so I did.
Mhm.
And for, I think, the first 3 years that I was there, we won top honors with Kennedy Center for the
Mhm.
shows that I did, Drowsy Chaperone, Parade, and Evita. And they flew me and my leads down to Kennedy Center in DC. And so that helped. And I also was nominated for a Berkshire Theater Award for my directing for Big River. And so these awards and things like that, it kind of just one thing leads to another. And,
Mhm.
you know, um, but, and you got to hustle. That's the
Yeah.
thing. It's just important, whether it's acting, directing, whatever it is. There are jobs out there. Someone
Yep.
has to get them. So it might as well be you, is what I always say to my students. But
It's
you're not going to get a job unless you show up.
yeah, they're not gonna come to you. They're not gonna come knocking on
No,
your door if you're not out there hustling for them. It's so
no,
true.
we don't.
Yeah.
One thing that
Alright, well, yeah,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh,
No,
one thing
you.
that I didn't mention that I really wanted to. We have a connection and actually a partnership with several of the top equity theaters in that area.
Mhm.
So we've had for about 6 years now, kind of an unofficial partnership with ACT, which is in
Mhm.
Richfield, and it's only about 15-20 minutes away. So they hire a lot of our students. But more importantly, now we've become connected with Goodspeed Opera.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And so they come and audition us because they heard about us. And so for the last 3 years, they have hired 10 to 15 of our students for their New Works Festival.
Yep.
And so that's kind of a built-in and a huge stepping stone for a lot of our students,
Yep.
because that's kind of the premier music theater in the country.
Yep. I love it. So this always so exciting when you have those kind of regional connections and the specific ins. It's just what a help at 18 when or 19 or 20 when you're starting off. It's great.
Yeah.
I'd love to wrap with just a little bit. We've given a bunch of advice to the students in the process. I'd love to wrap with a little advice for the parents. Many of our listeners, of course, are parents who are listening for their children. And so, just from your experience guiding families through this process and talking to parents, what advice do you have for them in terms of how they can help support their child through this crazy process? You mentioned 20 schools and stuff that so many of them are doing. What advice do we have to those parents in terms of how they could best support their kids?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that it's really, I think it's really difficult. I mean, I have a goddaughter that went through this process a couple of years ago, and I see it, and I'm actually more empathetic to the students and the parents now
Hmm.
because of having gone through that experience with her. But the main thing that I often say to the parents who are worried about their child going into theater and getting a BFA, what are they going to do with it? It's a very hard business, and indeed it is. But what I say to the parents is that really just supporting them is the
Hmm.
most important thing, because if a student if someone wants to do this for the rest of their life, you have to follow your dreams. You know, I was a person that came from a town of 2,300 in Ohio. It was a crazy dream that I had, but I knew that I had to get out.
Hmm.
So I needed to work really hard so that I would be skilled enough to do that. And so I tell the parents that really just support them, because a BFA does not mean that if you choose not to pursue the acting, you still have learned incredible discipline and time management and people skills, so that you are actually very hireable, no matter, even if you're not going to do that. And because we requires our students to take Tech One and costume tech, and all of that, they've got skills. So sometimes a
Hmm.
student ends up being, you know, a designer or a dresser on Broadway. We have a
Hmm.
lot of connections with with uh, with costumers, and you know, our costumer Joni Lerner, uh, you know, still paints all the silks for Lion King, and so she hooks
Hmm.
up a lot of our students as well. So I think that the most important thing for the parents is to just support the student,
Hmm.
the child, and know that that there will be a place, and it's not going to do any good to not support them on this, because you can't tell a dog that he's not a dog. It's like you are what you are, and
Hmm.
we're kind of, if this career chooses you, it just did.
It's so true. Cannot go wrong with a little bit of support, and I like that idea of you. It won't do any good to not support them. Right? It won't actually
No,
help them necessarily. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep, I love it. All right, well, Tim, I really appreciate the time today. I know we got to get you out of here, so thanks for this chat. If people want more information, where should they check out more? Do you like them going to Instagram? You like them going to the website? You like them emailing you? What's the best way for people to
Yeah,
hear more if
if
they want
they'll
more?
just if you just Google, we have a lot of media on Instagram and Facebook. And of course, they can always email me at howardt@wcsu.edu.
Hmm.
But also, if you go to the website, you'll get a lot of information. You'll see a lot of production photos and some videos as well. But our websites really, we have a professional uh, person who comes in and films all of our productions, and so
Hmm.
they look fantastic, and the students get to have those for their reel at the
Hmm.
end, and you get to see prior the kind of work that's going on as well. So all of
Beautiful.
those are options to kind of get to know us better.
I love it. All right. Well, Tim, thanks for the time today. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much.